You know those buildings, the ones that just feel like the heart and soul of a city? These stunning places we walk past maybe every single day.
Hmm.
And perhaps we don't always stop to really think about the stories they hold inside, but trust me, within those walls, there are always echoes, right? Echoes of the past.
It's so true. Every city has
Yeah.
these silent architectural witnesses.
Yeah.
And often it's the stories tucked away, right in plain sight that are the most fascinating.
And that's exactly where we're heading today, into the heart of one of those silent witnesses. This is a deep dive specifically requested by one of you listeners, the Bohus Palace in Arad, Romania.
Yes.
We've got some really incredible material here, excerpts from a document called Palace Cr Street Arad.pdf. And believe me, this goes way, way beyond just the bricks and mortar.
Exploring a single building like this can be a fantastic lens, can it?
Mm-hmm.
It really lets us understand the complex interplay of, well, social, economic, cultural forces, how they shaped a city and the lives within it over time.
Precisely. So our mission today, if you will, is to unpack the history, the significance of this Arad landmark using this amazing document. I mean, this building stood through shifting empires, artistic booms, even the dawn of cinema.
It really is a microcosm of history.
Yeah. Get ready for some genuinely surprising insights and those wonderful aha moments we love. So the natural place to start is, why the Bohus Palace? What makes this building so special?
Well, that's a key question, and our source material actually addresses it directly. This deep dive is framed as a kind of natural next step, following previous looks at other Arad icons.
Like the Cultural Palace.
Exactly, the Cultural Palace, the City Hall, even biographies of key figures like Salash Gula, the Franciscan Church.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. It's not just any building. It's presented as the quintessential example of Arad's secession architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Secession architecture that's that turn of the 20th century style, right? Lots of flowing lines, kind of organic, moving away from strict historical stuff, aiming for something modern, artistic.
Precisely. It was about creating a total work of art. So, after covering those other important monographs, focusing on this standout example of the style, well, it makes perfect sense.
And what's really interesting, the author of these excerpts argues that the Bohus family themselves deserve a full biography, not just because of this amazing palace.
Oh, absolutely. Their influence, both in Sharia Vilagos and Arad itself, was much broader than just this one building.
They were a real powerhouse, weren't they? Originally, very much tied to their noble roots, loyal to the royal house. Standard stuff for the time, maybe.
Yes, that was their initial identity.
But here's where it gets fascinating. They changed. They went through this big transformation, progress became their thing, and they used their knowledge, their political clout, their, frankly, considerable wealth to actively shape the world around them.
And this shift, from traditional aristocracy towards getting involved in science, industry, politics, it mirrors a wider trend across Europe in the 19th century. The nobility adapting, finding new ways to contribute.
Exactly. Our source material even points to their ancestral castle in Sharia, and that place has serious historical weight. It was there in 1849 that the Hungarian Revolutionary Army surrendered.
That's a huge moment. Part of the 1848-49 Hungarian Revolution against Austrian rule.
A major turning point. And this just underlines the family's deep roots in the region, how they were caught up in these massive historical events long before the Arad Palace was even a twinkle in their eye.
It shows their entanglement wasn't just recent.
And their reach wasn't just local either. The family apparently originated in Slovakia, spread across the Pannonian Plain. But the Arad branch really kicks off when Empress Maria Theresa donates land to a Bohus Imre.
Ah, the Maria Theresa connection.
Yeah, and this ties directly into that saying, Arad Marad, Arad remains.
Yeah.
Because the Empress initially wanted to move the entire town.
Really moved the whole town.
Yes, to the Bohus property in Zman Pusta. That was the plan.
Wow. So the ownership of land by this one family became tied up with the city's actual location, its destiny. Their resistance, or maybe just how things played out, kept Arad where it was.
Right. And this Bohus Imre, he owned the biggest house in Arad back then, so clearly prominent from early on. Then we get to Bohus Janos of Vilagosvar. Now this guy sounds like a character. In 1835, his plans for grazing land were apparently so unpopular, they sparked a peasant uprising in Syria.
Oof. Well, that certainly highlights the often tricky relationship between landowners and the rural population back then. His initial approach maybe wasn't the most
Well,
diplomatic.
but what's really interesting is how he evolved, right?
Exactly. Because this is the same Llanos who, just a few years earlier in 1828,
Mm.
organized what's considered the oldest international horse riding competition in the region.
Get out.
Inspired by the English model, apparently. And it actually happened before the more famous event put on by Shigeni Istvan.
No way. That's quite a surprising detail. Shows he wasn't stuck in the past.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It shows a capacity to embrace new ideas, engage with international trends. A big contrast to the grazing rights issue, wouldn't you say?
Totally. And his transformation didn't stop there. Later on, he becomes a supporter of reform. He grants a permanent annuity to the Hungarian Science Society, a big deal. That was a major scholarly body.
Very prestigious.
And he even abolished serf taxes on his own land quite early on. By 1848, during the revolution, he's serving as the prefect of Arad.
That's quite a journey, from sparking peasant revolts to being a civic leader during a major national uprising.
It just shows how dynamic things were in the 19th century, how people could shift their views, adapt to the times.
It really underscores that, individuals responding to these huge social and political currents swirling around them.
Okay, now let's talk about his wife, Sogini Antonia. What an absolutely remarkable woman. Our source describes her philanthropy, her courage, her support for the early feminist movement.
Her contributions really do stand out, don't they?
Yeah.
She wasn't just, a wife in the background. She was actively engaged with the intellectual life of her time, made a real mark.
Absolutely. She organized literary events, musical gatherings, supported poets like Boris Marty's orphan kids. She founded kindergartens in both Sharia and Arad.
That's impressive in itself.
She didn't stop there. Set up a free canteen, a tailor shop for people in need. Real practical help.
These initiatives show such a commitment to social welfare, to education. It reflects that growing awareness of social issues among the more progressive aristocrats back then.
And she was right in the thick of it during the huge Arad floods of 1844, giving aid, pushing for the Aradi Veslepak newspaper to raise funds for victims.
A real community leader.
But her role in the 1848 revolution is particularly compelling. She set up a field hospital, and she kept a diary documenting the surrender negotiations that happened at Sharia.
Oh, wow. A first-hand account.
Yes. And she knew Gergely Artur, the Hungarian general. Her diary notes that actually no formal surrender document was ever signed, and she observed how demoralized Gergely was.
Fascinating detail. That kind of on-the-ground observation is priceless.
She seemed to sense the disaster coming, despite Russian promises of protection. And even after the revolution was crushed, she kept supporting imprisoned officers, even when the Austrian general Heine threatened her directly.
That took real courage, serious personal risk involved there.
They eventually put up a statue to her in Sharia. This woman was a force.
Her actions really highlight the commitment some aristocrats had to their ideals, even facing severe repression.
Yeah.
It wasn't universal, but it was there.
So János and Antonia had 3 sons, Sigmund, István, and Laszlo. All of them later became barons in 1894.
Baron Sigmund, he really stands out.
The politician.
Yeah, elected to Parliament 5 times, imperial and royal chamberlain, secret domestic counselor, and incredibly wealthy, ranked among the absolute highest taxpayers in the country. So the family's influence clearly continued, strong as ever, right into the late 19th, early 20th century. Wealth and political power.
And he wasn't just hoarding it. He actively backed the development of local railways. He was president of the United Railway Company Arad Sanad.
Infrastructure. Crucial for economic growth. Connecting Arad to other towns, that's a significant contribution.
Then his brother, Baron Laszlo, took a slightly different route. He seemed to prefer life out at the Sharia castle, focused on animal husbandry, viticulture.
More of a country gentleman, perhaps?
Seems like it. But he was still a big contributor locally, established 3 schools, played a key role in the area's economic development.
But a different kind of impact. More localized, focused on the immediate community's well-being, its prosperity.
And get this, he founded a cognac and liqueur factory in Sharia.
Did he really?
Yes. His Marthy melon liqueur apparently became super popular. So popular, it later got linked somehow with the famous Zwak company.
From vineyards to liqueur production. Quite entrepreneurial.
And he clearly cared about history, too. He donated Kossuth's resignation letter to the Arad Museum.
That's a significant artifact. It paints a picture of someone with really diverse interests, doesn't it? Farming, industry, history.
And apparently both brothers were into photography. Laszlo was even a pioneer in early color photography.
Wow, color photography back then. That was cutting edge.
Yeah. Plus, they jointly set up a foundation in their mother's name for poor kids, and Zygmunt gave a lot of money to the Arad Theater. Just an incredible family legacy, really.
Absolutely.
So, with all this swirling around the family, how did the idea for the Grand Bohus Palace in Arad actually come about?
Well, the source suggests the idea really picked up steam after they unveiled the statue of their mother, Antonia, in Syria.
Oh, okay.
And Baron Zygmunt, with his strong Arad connections and, his prominence, seems to have been the main initiator, the driving force.
So, partly a tribute, maybe, but also a reflection of Arad itself, which was really booming then, wasn't it? This was Arad's Belle Epoque.
Oh, absolutely. The late 19th, early 20th centuries were a golden age for the city.
Yeah.
That Belle Epoque, the beautiful era across Europe before World War I, characterized by optimism, cultural flourishing, rapid progress.
And Arad's status as a free royal city, granted way back in 1834, was finally really paying off. They had this visionary mayor serve for 26 years.
An impressive tenure.
Yeah. And under him, the city just transformed. Massive development in public services, infrastructure. The whole urban fabric changed.
We're talking electricity, public transport, the foundations of a modern city being laid right then.
And not just utilities, the town hall, the grand theater, loads of schools, real civic pride, big building projects everywhere.
And if you zoom out, this kind of rapid urbanization, this development push was happening all over Europe then. Cities were actively competing, trying to modernize, attract investment, attract people.
Arad was definitely in that race, constantly looking over its shoulder at Szeged, Subotica, Timisoara, or Radea.
Neighbors, rivals, maybe.
Yeah, maybe not always a formal rivalry, but that drive to keep up, maybe get ahead, it fueled a lot of this development. And here's the thing. Alongside these big public buildings, private individuals were building these incredible palaces, too.
Indeed. The Hermann Palace, Neumann Palace, Lengiel Loreng's Palace. The list goes on in the source. These private projects clearly showed the growing wealth, the ambitions of Arad's elite.
And the Bohus brothers, well, they undoubtedly wanted a place that reflected their status, right? And contributed to the city's growing architectural prestige.
Exactly. They pictured a modern palace, something that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the impressive new buildings in those rival cities.
They already had a family house, an older one, on that prominent corner, Zirny and Edsel Peter Streets.
Right. The source mentions that. It had its own history, late Baroque, housed a fashion shop, the literary circle met there.
But yeah, that older house, despite its history, it just wasn't grand enough for their new vision, was it?
Clearly not. They wanted something much more substantial, not just a home, but a statement, a contribution to the city's skyline.
So to make it happen, they turned to Ludovic Sante. He was considered Arad's top architect at the time, the most prestigious.
His involvement really signals how serious they were about architectural quality.
He got the commission, and it seems likely he worked closely with the family, especially the aging Baron Zygmunt, maybe Baron Lajos too, to get the design just right.
And Sante's own memoirs, quoted in our source, describe a truly impressive plan. Multiple floors, loads of apartments, huge space for a bank, a cinema, an art gallery, shops.
All the mod cons too, right?
Oh yes. Central heating and remarkably concrete floors. A first for Arad, apparently. Very innovative for the time.
Wow. And the old house didn't vanish without a whisper. When they demolished it in 1912, workers actually found coins in the foundations dating from 1748, 1749.
Isn't that fantastic? A literal, tangible link back to the site's earlier history, the people who lived there before the Grand Palace idea even existed.
Building something like this wasn't cheap, obviously. The Bohus brothers had to get a pretty hefty loan from the People's Industrial Bank of Arad. And as part of the deal, the bank got prime space on the ground floor of the new palace, a strategic move for them.
It really highlights that close relationship between prominent families and local banks, doesn't it? How those partnerships often fueled these big urban development projects.
So the foundation stone was laid in 1912. Big ceremony, lots of important people. The inscription on the stone reads like a who's who of the era.
Names like King Franz Josef, the prime minister, local prefects, the mayor.
And the Bohus family themselves, of course.
Yeah.
Plus the bank guys and the construction team.
That inscription is like a little time capsule, isn't it? Capturing the key players, the mood of the time right at the project's start.
And they built it fast, only about a year and a half.
Remarkable speed.
The source suggests maybe it didn't get huge press coverage during construction because everyone was focused on the big cultural palace being built around the same time.
That seems plausible. Big public projects often grab more headlines than private ones, even really significant private ones like this palace clearly was.
But amazingly, the Apollo Cinema inside the palace opened early, August 1913. And it was designed as a cinema from day one, which was pretty forward-thinking.
Very much so. Purpose-built cinemas weren't common everywhere yet.
And it seems the whole palace complex was likely finished by summer 1914, just as World War I was starting. Terrible timing, really. Probably overshadowed the grand completion.
Absolutely. Major world events have a way of eclipsing local milestones, unfortunately.
But even with war looming, it must have been an incredibly imposing building, a real symbol of Arad's growing importance, its prosperity. The details sound amazing.
Well, the descriptions, those geometric balconies, the corner tower with the double dome, that illuminated glass balcony.
Modern elevators, the fancy wrought iron and glass roof over the cinema entrance, metal trim doors, bronze display panels.
It screams secession style, doesn't it? And incorporates all the latest technology, very advanced building for its time and place.
And it wasn't isolated. It formed this harmonious group with the Nadazdi Palace nearby and another palace on Skirta Street. Zrini Street must have looked incredibly grand.
Creating these unified, aesthetically pleasing streetscapes really added to the city's visual appeal, that sense of urban sophistication they were aiming for.
Now, sadly, the Bohus family didn't actually own this magnificent palace for very long.
No, the economic turmoil, the political shifts after World War I, they took their toll.
Yeah, they ended up selling it to the very bank that helped finance it, the People's Industrial Bank of Arad.
It reflects that broader instability after the war, doesn't it? Even wealthy, established families like the Bohus weren't immune.
And then the bank itself went bankrupt in 1933.
Turbulent times.
And the palace was taken over by Banca Romaniasca. But we get this amazing insight from a guy named Usora Sandor. He was the man of the house for decades, mechanical foreman, carpenter from 1925 to 1959.
His memories must be invaluable, giving us a glimpse of the day-to-day life inside those walls.
Totally. He talked about managing the heating, keeping the elevators running, how they used the cellars for shelter during the war. It really humanizes this grand building.
It does. It stops being just architecture and becomes a place where people lived and worked.
He remembered all sorts of people living in the apartments, directors, landowners, doctors, engineers, even mentions a strange guy, Alfoldi Paul, who had a big art collection.
A real mix.
And the ground floor was always buzzing. All those shops, Gloria Stationery, Boy and the Confectioner, Ilyas's Buffet, a shoe shop, Taylor Croissant or Ginga, later Kramer the Hat Maker, and the Eplos Cinema, of course.
It paints such a vivid picture, doesn't it?
Ah.
The palace is this microcosm of Arad society, housing residents, businesses, culture, and the changing shop names, even the street names, reflected those shifting political tides over the decades.
Exactly. Zrini Street became Anatole France, then Vasil Goldiar. Atsel Peter Street got absorbed into Revolution Avenue eventually, like the city map itself was being rewritten.
History etched onto the streets.
Now, what about those attic art galleries? That sounds really intriguing.
Yes, the source mentions them. The exact origin of the idea is a bit hazy. Maybe not the Bohus family's idea initially.
Oh?
Perhaps more likely the architect, Sante. Maybe adding some visual interest, some artistic flair to that long facade.
Okay, so maybe an architectural flourish that became something more. Right from the start, these attic spaces were used by artists. A fascinating group of them.
Quite diverse, yes.
Yeah.
Rubletsky Geza, a sculptor who'd worked on the Cultural Palace. Pataki Sandor, a well-known watercolorist famous for his Arad vineyard landscapes.
Lovely.
The Frenu family, Zizi and Sever, they became really central figures in the Arad art scene, especially during the socialist realism period. Zizi even did puppet theater design up there in the attic.
No way.
Tamas Maria, a graphic artist and painter, very prolific, exhibited widely. And Takacs Mihaly, a painter and sculptor passionate about Arad's cityscape, he even restored local monuments.
It's incredible, this mix of artists, different styles, all working up there in the attic of the Bohus Palace.
It really shows the building wasn't just about commerce or residence. It fostered creativity, became this vibrant artistic hub within the city. Their stories highlight the rich artistic energy in Arad through the 20th century.
And speaking of arts and culture, the palace played this huge role in early cinema in Arad.
It really did. Arad was perhaps surprisingly a significant player in the early Transylvanian film scene, alongside bigger places like Cluj and Oradea.
Even before proper cinemas, they had things like aletoscopes and a pharmacist, Rosnyaya Matyas, projecting images way back.
Yes, these early forms of projection were happening. Then Joseph Stifler started showing living pictures in 1897.
Though, funnily enough, the source says the inauguration of new streetlights drew a bigger crowd than one of his first film shows.
Huh. It's a charming detail, isn't it? Streetlights were a tangible improvement. Cinema was still as a novelty, maybe less understood. Priorities.
But cinema caught on fast. Janovik's Gen was showing films in Cluj, someone shot a film in Arad. Then the first proper cinema, the Urania, opened in 1907 in the old theater building.
That move to dedicated spaces was key.
And Arad started making its own short films. Local newsreels, events.
Laying the groundwork for a real film culture. From traveling shows to permanent venues, a big shift in entertainment.
By World War I, Arad had 3 cinemas. One, of course, was the Apollo in the Bohus Palace. Later, the very modern Corso opened too.
Competition heats up.
Yeah. And Janovik's Geno, that key film figure, came back to Arad for projects. They showed big Romanian silent films after 1920. And let's not forget Arad natives who hit the big times Zifra Geza, Feher Imre, and the huge star Javor Paul.
Arad was clearly engaged, watching films, making films, producing stars.
And right at the heart of it all was that star movie theater in the Bohus Palace, the Apollo, which later became the Forum, then Balcescu, then Studio.
So many name changes.
Tells a story in itself, right? But the key thing, it was built exclusively as a cinema in a provincial city. That was a national first.
That really was a landmark achievement. It signaled cinema becoming mainstream mass entertainment. And names like Apollo, Urania, very common for these new temples of film referencing the arts and sciences.
The Arad Apollo, in its new, bigger home in the palace, was a sensation. Much bigger capacity, space for a small orchestra for the silent films.
Live music was crucial back then.
And those entrances with the fancy iron and glass roof must have felt very glamorous.
Definitely trying to create a sophisticated, immersive experience, capturing the magic, the novelty of early movies.
The first show, newsreels, comedy, drama, continuous screenings all day. And they were showing the big international stars. Valdemar Seilander was huge then, and Asta Nielsen, the first real female movie star.
Arad audiences were right up to date with international trends, seeing the latest films, the biggest stars.
But the absolute peak of excitement, Valdemar Seilander himself visiting Arad, he was the idol of women.
Oh, the stories about that visit are amazing. The police actually issued special regulations just for his appearance.
No way,
Because they expected huge crowds of female fans. Restrictions on where men could stand, age limits for women allowed near him, rules about autographs, even warnings about women sending letters containing keys.
Keys! Wow, proper fan frenzy.
Absolutely. He arrived looking every inch. The star, fur coat, top hat, white gloves. Women apparently mobbed his hotel.
So they had to move his performance, right? The Apollo wasn't big enough.
Exactly. Last-minute change to the much larger National Theater. It just shows the scale of the fascination. Reports mention the theater being perfumed for his arrival.
Perfumed. And someone wrote a poem in the paper complaining about the venue change.
Yes. Shows the almost mythical status these early stars had.
And the performance itself. He tried to sing in broken Hungarian.
Apparently so. One local newspaper reporter was distinctly unimpressed, called him a weak actor, despite the hype and his huge fee.
Huh. A bit of critical perspective there. But even after he died quite young, they still showed his last film at the Apollo.
His fame endured.
Arad even got an early taste of talking films way back in 1914. Though sound film really took off later, obviously, with Hollywood dominating. But the Apollo kept showing the big names, Bette Davis, Judy Garland. And Hungarian sound films were huge too. Butler Hippolyte, starring Arad's own Javor Paul, and The Dream Car.
And Javor Paul's story is fantastic. Apparently used to skip school to go to the cinema in Arad, then becomes this massive national star himself.
Incredible journey. Proof of cinema's power, right?
Definitely.
Competition grew between Arad's cinemas. The Corso got a reputation as a more moral cinema. Javor Paul came back to Arad in 1946, huge crowds again.
Still a major draw.
But sadly, the Apollo, after all those names, all that history, it declined after 1990, and now the source says it's in disrepair.
It's a poignant end, isn't it, for such a vibrant, historically significant place? A reminder that even popular landmarks can fade without care and preservation.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. The palace and its immediate neighbors on Zrni Street. It's interesting. It's such a grand building on a relatively narrow street.
Yes, but it was certainly in distinguished company there.
Right across the street was the First Savings Bank of Arad, a major player, survived economic crises, funded big projects. It eventually closed, replaced by Banca Romaniasca, another layer of economic history right there.
Hmm. Financial institutions often anchor key commercial streets.
And also across Zrini Street was the People's Canteen, founded by Mrs. Neumann Danielne First Maria, giving free meals to the poor.
What a contrast.
Exactly. The palace, the bank, symbols of wealth. And right opposite, this place meeting basic needs. It's really thought-provoking.
It highlights those social inequalities, definitely, and the vital role philanthropy played in trying to bridge the gap. Baroness Maria's Spiritual Folk Canteen album sounds amazing, getting contributions from Yochai Moore, Mark Twain, Emile Zola.
Incredible reach. Then there's the Goldie House, also on Zrini Street, classical style, bit of secession thrown in, bought by the politician Vasil Goldie in 1911.
Ah, and that became a really important center for the Romanian national emancipation movement, didn't it? Housed the Concordia Publishing House, the newspaper Romano.
Absolutely pivotal, a hub for fostering national consciousness, attracting intellectuals. The source even mentions the arguments, the polemics between Romanol and another paper, Tribuna. Very dynamic politics.
There's the intensity of the debates back then.
And right next door to the Goldie House was the Lloyd's Insurance Society Club. Popular spot for businessmen, apparently.
A place to relax, network.
And on the other side of the Goldie House, the Hakoah Sports Club. An ethnically Jewish club achieved national success in sports, but sadly disbanded in 1940.
Such a concentration of different activities, different histories, all packed into that one short street section around the palace.
It really shows how central the palace was, doesn't it? Connected to finance, philanthropy, politics, social life, sport, the whole fabric of the city.
It truly does. Its location wasn't just physical. It was socially and culturally central, too.
So, what about the Bohus Palace today? It's still a landmark, obviously, but the source expresses regret about its condition, right?
Yes, the lack of renovation is a key point. The privatization process after 1990 issues with multiple owners. It's unfortunately hampered any major restoration efforts. It's fallen into disrepair.
Such a shame, those early elevators, once a symbol of modernity, civic pride, now just museum pieces, not working.
A poignant symbol of its current state.
The ground floor now, a medical library, the College of Physicians, a secondhand shop. In the building next door, the old public health department has been demolished.
Making way for a new multifunctional complex, apparently, which will mean even more traffic on that narrow street.
It's quite a contrast with the Bohus Castle out in Iria, isn't it? That's part of the Arad Museum complex now, preserved, housing artifacts from the family, the capitulation.
Yes, the castle has found a secure future as a museum site, preserving some tangible links to the Bohus' legacy portraits, documents, that inscribed table.
But the palace did have a recent moment in the spotlight. It was featured in that 2015 film, On the Road with My Father.
Oh, interesting.
Apparently, they filmed it carefully, avoiding the damaged parts. Its cinematic history kind of continues, in a way.
That's a nice contemporary link back to its past as a cinema hub. It shows the architecture still has that visual power, even faded.
So the big questions hanging over it now are property rights, the potential for restoration. It all sounds very complicated.
Very much so. These situations with multiple owners after privatization can be incredibly difficult to resolve.
And there's this strong feeling in the local Hungarian community wanting to see the old Polo cinema space revitalized, maybe as a cultural venue.
Yes, the source mentions that aspiration, and the idea of naming it after Javor Paul.
That would be fitting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Honoring the Arad-born film star in the very place that played such a role in the city's film history.
It would be a very meaningful tribute, yes. A way to connect the past and future, breathe new life into a space with such a rich story. But the palace's future, overall, remains uncertain.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, wow, we've really peeled back the layers on the Bohus Palace, haven't we? It's an incredibly rich history.
It really is. From the influential Bohus family themselves, their impact across the region, to the palace's architectural significance, its role in Arad's social cultural life. Especially cinema and the arts.
It's amazing how one building can hold so much history. Ambitions, challenges, the whole vibrant life of different eras in the city.
It truly encapsulates so much of Arad's story.
And you listening, you now have this fantastic shortcut to understanding a really captivating piece of Arad's past, all thanks to the details packed into this source material. So here's a final thought, something for you to maybe ponder. What does the story of the Bohus Palace, its past glory, its current faded state, its uncertain future, what does it tell us about how we preserve our urban heritage? That delicate balance between saving the past and the relentless push of progress in our cities.
That's a great question.
Maybe take a moment. Look around your own surroundings. What layers of history might be hidden in plain sight in the buildings you see every day?
This deep dive really does raise that important question, doesn't it? About our collective responsibility to look after these historical witnesses, to make sure their stories keep being told, keep being understood.
Well, thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been fascinating. Until our next exploration.